Let's let a guy that's a starting pitcher be a starting pitcher. Dodgers lose again. We're talking about it.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is the daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. And you can go beyond the podcast from Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. If this is your first time listening, watching, welcome. I'm Vince Samperio, usually joined by my co-host Jeff Snyder, but just me tonight. We've been Dodger fans our whole lives. We've covered the team over the last decade in a few different ways, and we've been doing this podcast here since 2019. And we're here once again, and we're talking about a Dodger loss tonight. Unfortunately, we're going to start off talking about openers and starters and when the Dodgers should or shouldn't employ these. We're going to talk a little bit about Mookie Betts hitting a couple homers and just the overall offense on the night, which was positive, just annoying. And we're going to talk about Ryan McMahon because Bob Nightengale mentioned him as someone the Dodgers are keeping an eye on. And is that somebody that fits this roster? Well, let's start first with the Dodgers. It was Landon Knack's turn in the rotation. Landon Knack was not out there to start the game. It was Jack Dreyer. And this is one of those where it's not necessarily what I'm about to say isn't necessarily results driven. Obviously, Jack Dreyer did give up 3 runs. He might not have given up any runs if Hyeseong Kim had seen the fly ball that Jack Dreyer allowed, or if he had let Teoscar Hernandez know that he couldn't see the ball, and then Teoscar Hernandez could have made the play. But ultimately, for me, and I felt this way for the most part the last few years when the Dodgers started using openers, is use an opener when you have a guy that's more of a bulk inning guy rather than necessarily a starter. If the guy's a starter, let him start the game. And that's how I feel with Landon Knack. He's a starter right now. He's one of the guys in the rotation. Treat him like a starter. You know, you wouldn't have an opener for more established guys. And yeah, Landon Knack's not as established. Yeah, Landon Knack is a guy that, you know, struggles to get 2 times through an order sometimes, and, you know, let alone 3 times through an order. But if he's a guy that's in your rotation, you know, let him start the game. Let him feel comfortable. Let him, you know, and it's not that Landon Knack hasn't had an opener, hasn't come in as a reliever, hasn't had that. But for me, it's just like, let him do what he's done. He's been up in the majors this year, and he has been a reliever once in Japan, and then he's been a starter the other 4 times. And it, you know, just let him be the starter this 5th time. I understand the D-backs, you know, you might want to steal a couple out there at the beginning with Jack Dreyer because there's a lot of lefties up top lineup or switch hitters or whatever it is. I understand the thinking, but for me, I'm not old school in too many ways, but I do feel old school in the sense of if a guy's a starting pitcher, let him be a starting pitcher. Now, if we're in the postseason and that's a little bit different story, you know, if you really want to exploit a matchup, then yeah, I guess go ahead and, you know, there's more conversations to be had there. But for me, right now, Landon Knack's a starter in this rotation. Let him be a starter in this rotation. Now, ultimately, it might not have mattered because Landon Knack could have gave up the 4 runs he gave up in the 3rd inning. He could have easily given them up in the 1st inning. And if the game, you know, went the same way, the Dodgers, it would have been a closer game, but the Dodgers still would have lost. Like it technically would have been 6-5 instead of 9-5. But yeah, it was a tough start from the beginning, and it was similar in a sense to the start of Game 1 of the 2023 NLDS. You know, James Outman misses the ball in the outfield, and obviously that was a lot different in terms of how many runs ended up scoring in that inning. But, you know, Hyeseong Kim's out there playing center field. I know a lot of people are going to be asking why is he out there and not Tommy Edman when Tommy Edman can play a better center field. You're having a strong center fielder and a really strong second baseman rather than a extremely strong second baseman and an inexperienced center fielder. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I would imagine that Tommy Edman is being brought along slowly, and they don't want to necessarily stick him out in center field, where there's a potential for a lot more running and some with his ankle and stuff like that. And they do want Hyeseong Kim to kind of be one of those utility guys that can play outfield and infield. But it's tough because Kim hasn't played center field in his professional career other than the 9 or 10 games he played it for the OKC Comets in AAA this year. And this was he hasn't looked great out there in center field. So this isn't just a matter of, okay, he missed the ball because he couldn't see the ball and he didn't know how to react to not seeing the ball. And that's the way they want to do it. I can understand that. But yeah, this is just a nature of the situation. Tommy Edman's coming back from injury. The Dodgers probably want him to play second base for a few days or maybe not be out in center field every single day. And this is just the nature of that. Now there's obviously a conversation for Pages to just be in center field all the time unless there's a stronger center fielder there. But this is just how the lineup was made. This is how they do it. And this was just the nature of it. But ultimately, what can you do? What can you do when a guy can't see the ball? And we did see, I believe Dodger Blue, our buddies at Dodger Blue had a video of Teoscar Hernandez talking to Kim in the dugout after that first inning and just kind of letting him know, like, hey, move your hands like this when you don't know where the ball is. That way I know that you don't know where the ball is. And if I know where the ball is, then I can go get it. I mean, Teoscar was right there. And I feel like had he given a quick look down, he would have seen, oh, Kim's not anywhere near me. Let me just catch this ball. But obviously he's focusing on the baseball as well. So he probably didn't get to see it. And the ball dropped in. And that first inning ends up being 3 runs. All the runs end up being earned because since nobody really touched the ball, they didn't call it an error. But yeah, I mean, it all kind of started ominously that way. And then by the time we get to the second or the third inning, Landon Knack gives up 4 runs. And now you're down 7-0. And even with an offense that is expected to put up a decent amount of runs, the Dodgers ended up ultimately putting up 5 runs. But when you give up 7 in the first 3 innings, that's a tough thing to come back from. And for me with Knack, I know there's a question of should Knack even be the guy. And I've, been advocating that if he's going to be in the rotation, leave him in the rotation. He, at this point, doesn't have the stuff of a Bobby Miller, doesn't even have the stuff of a Justin Robleski, but is a little bit more polished. You're going to get a little bit more out of him. Or you're going to have a higher floor, but a lower ceiling. But yeah, this is how games are going to go right now. There's going to be games like this when the Dodgers are down so many pitchers and so many relievers. There's going to be games where somebody struggles and you have a big deficit. Your offense can hopefully help you out and get some runs there, but it's not pretty. And that's how this game was. It wasn't pretty. It was one that maybe people shut off in that third inning. Once the Dodgers are down 7-0, you're not necessarily looking to continue to watch that. So it's just, yeah. And for the 4th game in a row, the Dodgers allow runs in the first inning. It's hard to be down every single time. It's hard for your offense to, look up when they come up for the first at bat and you're already losing. That's a tough thing about it. There are more questions out there to be talked about, and I don't know, we'll see if we get the chance to talk about it. Like, if the rotation comes through again, will Landon Knack be there? I don't know. Landon Knack at this point is, what you're going to get. You're going to get 4 to 5 innings. You're going to get 2 to 5 runs, and you're going to have days where it's 2 runs. You're going to have days where it's 5 runs, and you just don't know what you're going to get. At the very least, Landon Knack was able to recover after that first inning he pitched and was able to save the Dodgers bullpen a little bit. And that's a a saving grace in a game like this. Give the Dodgers a chance. They almost had the tying run up in that last inning. We saw Shohei Ohtani have a big home run against this D-backs team not that long ago. So, you could have had visions of something happening there in that last inning that just didn't ultimately happen. But on the offensive side, there was some things to like. Mookie Betts homered twice. Shohei Ohtani homered once. The Dodgers had a lot of expected batting average, not a lot of actual batting average. I know it ultimately doesn't matter when you don't score the runs and get those things, but it matters a little bit. We're going to talk about that, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever logged on and checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, Dodger tickets, and more, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And it's not just a budgeting app. It's not just something to help you save a few dollars here and there. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts. You can track all your investments. You can track all your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building that wealth. Who wouldn't want to start building wealth? When I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much I was spending on things that ultimately didn't matter, or ultimately were luxuries or things I shouldn't be spending money on necessarily if I'm trying to, build some wealth. And now I budget smarter and save more because Monarch Money has helped me figure out what that is. And I don't have to use a bunch of different apps. I just use one app, check my finances, track my spending, and even plan those long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day, last listen of the day, whatever listen of the day. We appreciate those of you that listen and tune in and watch, and however you do it, we appreciate that. And now we're going to talk about the offense. And I know there's a lot of things to get into with the Dodgers, especially when they lose 4 games in a row, but that's just how it is. I do have one rebuttal here. It said, when was the last time Knack only gave up 2 runs? Landon Knack gave up 2 runs on April 15th against the Rockies, went 4.1 innings, and Landon Knack gave up 0 runs in 5 innings against the Marlins on May 7th. So, yeah, sometimes you get bad Knack, sometimes probably against bad teams, but the Dodgers are going to play bad teams sometimes, and that's just the way it matters, I guess. But, all right, the Dodger offense, Mookie Betts, let's talk about him first because he hit a couple home runs, and this is something we were wanting to see out of Mookie Betts, which is the power, which we haven't really seen. Mookie's had, an underwhelming overall offensive season so far this season in terms of what we expect out of him. OPS plus on the season heading into this game was 114. So still 14% better than the rest of his league. But, you look at his entire career, that's 138. You look at the last 2 years, it's 165 and 144. So obviously trending under what he's done the last few years. And a lot of that comes from the lack of power. You look at his slugging percentage. Right now, he has the lowest slugging percentage he's ever had in a season. And obviously it's still early, and we're hoping that's going to change. And it's definitely gone up after Tuesday's game, or Monday's game, sorry. But yeah, I mean, it's we talked about it the other day. I'm not concerned about Mookie yet. I know that there are things to be concerned about. I know that the bat speed has been something people are concerned with, but ultimately Mookie Betts has shown us that he gets the job done, and he ultimately over the course of seasons is good, and there's no reason to doubt him yet. The other part of this is the rest of the offense. And with Mookie, I expect there to be more power. I expect there to be a better overall season, and I don't expect there to be too much beyond that. But let's talk about the rest of the offense on this night, because these are things that, you hate to hear when the Dodgers lose because who cares? Like, things like exit velocity, things like expected batting average, things like that don't ultimately matter because if the out is made, the out is made. Brandon Pfaadt threw 95 pitches against the Dodgers. He had 0 swings and misses. And, that's pretty hard to do, especially for a guy like Brandon Pfaadt who, has been successful in the major leagues, has been successful against the Dodgers before. I mean, what 6 1/3 scoreless his last outing against them. So it's tough. The Dodgers batting average on balls in play was 0 because all the balls hit off him were home runs. But he was throwing strikes. He only had 1 walk. But you go through and you kind of look at the Dodgers offense, and let's look at just some expected batting average just so you can kind of see, like, okay, it was not great offensively for the Dodgers because they only put up 5 runs and 3 against Brandon Pfaadt, but they could have had chances. A 580 in the first inning off Freddie Freeman's bat. There was a 380 off Hyeseong Kim's bat in the 3rd inning. In the 4th inning, there was 2 balls that had 770 expected batting averages. One was a home run by Mookie Betts. One was an out by Teoscar Hernandez. So, sometimes it just goes that way. Michael Conforto had a line out that had a 740 expected batting average. Tommy Edman had a line out that had a 590 expected batting average. Now, look, I know it doesn't matter. It was sometimes you're unlucky, sometimes you're not. And sometimes you hit the ball hard and it's right at someone. Sometimes you hit the ball soft and it's just over somebody's head or out of somebody's reach. It's tough. It's tough to, look at a game when the Dodgers are struggling and say, well, what does it matter? But, they were making good contact. They weren't striking out a lot. They had 2 strikeouts in the entire game. And, they had a chance. Shohei Ohtani was on deck to be the tying run in that last inning, and ultimately didn't come to that. But they put up 5 runs. The offense, we know, is going to be capable of scoring. We need them to score right now as Dodger fans because the pitching is super in flux and you don't know what you're going to get, or you do know what you're going to get and you don't have high expectations. 5 runs out of the Dodgers, they're now averaging 5 runs over the last 4 games. Haven't scored at least 5 runs in all those games, but even if they had, they still would have lost all 5 of those games or all 4 of those games. But it's tough, to score 5 runs and still feel disappointed. That's kind of how you feel with this offensive performance, to realize and look at the numbers and think like, man, they were hitting the ball hard. They were hitting the ball in places that sometimes, a lot of the times, end up being base hits. And this time they just weren't. And, you look at, against Pfaadt specifically, the average exit velocity against his sweeper was 96.8. The average exit velocity against his sinker was 96.5. The average exit velocity against his changeup was 94.3. Now, 95 plus is considered hard hit. So, 94.3 is right on there. The other 2 were hard hit, even against the fastball. They didn't hit as well, average-wise, but they did hit a lot more. Not concerned about the offense. That's just how it is. You would like to have runners on when these guys hit home runs. It didn't work out that way. Michael Conforto is probably on a hot seat a little bit, and we'll continue to wait and see what happens there. Especially with the rest of the guys on this roster, there's not a lot down in the minors right now that you can be like, oh, for sure, this is somebody we need to call. Alex Freeland could be that guy. He could play, spots in the infield, but it's not necessarily he's not like Dalton Rushing. He's not a guy that you expect to come up and hit because he's a top prospect. Alex Freeland is a very good prospect. He could very well come up and hit for the Dodgers, but he's not somebody you're calling up just to hit. He's a prospect because of the overall package. He plays shortstop, plays the middle infield, can play third base, and also has shown the ability to hit some down there, but it doesn't necessarily translate. So all in all, like we talked about it yesterday about the offense, I'm not concerned yet. They have, Miguel Rojas is the worst guy off the bench right now. Michael Conforto is the guy struggling the most on the roster right now, but they can more easily sit Michael Conforto these days, even if it's not all the time, but sometimes. Andy Paez can play the corner spot. Hyeseong Kim can be in there. Tommy Edman can play the outfield. Teoscar's back, so that fills another outfield spot. Like, there's more chances for that to happen. I just don't know if that's what's going to happen. But ultimately, for this Dodger team right now, it's the pitching. The Dodgers put up 5 runs tomorrow with Yamamoto on the mound and lose. That's just another point in that where you can only do so much on the offensive side where you need a little help from your pitching. So, but I talked about guys on the bench. I talked about guys on the roster. Bob Nightengale seemingly reports that are interested in somebody every week at this point. Last week, it said that they would be in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes after the season. This week, the name he brought up was Ryan McMahon, the guy on the Rockies, as somebody the Dodgers were keeping an eye on. Is this someone the Dodgers should keep an eye on? What role would he fill? What are they looking at? We're going to talk about all that, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. I want to thank you for being an everydayer. If you are one, an everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. We appreciate those of you that are everydayers here live with us right now in the chat. We appreciate those of you that are listening maybe on Tuesday morning. You probably didn't want to stay up and watch that Dodger game and almost 3 hours for a loss. But we appreciate all of you that listen and tune in. And remember, you can go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers to go beyond the podcast. You'll get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with the Dodgers. And you'll get invited to our Discord server. We can talk with other Dodger fans. So, all right. Listen, I know the pitching is the issue with the Dodgers right now. Right now, that issue is more of a health issue than anything else. And maybe that is an issue in itself of, okay, do we know when Blake Snell comes back, will he be good? Do we know when Tyler Glasnow comes back, will he be good and healthy and remain and able to pitch? Roki Sasaki, whenever he starts throwing the baseball again and comes back, do we know how he'll be? We don't know that. We don't know that right now. But at this point, that's what they're waiting for. If it was June 19th or July 19th and, right after the All-Star break and the Dodgers still don't have Glasnow, still don't have Snell, still don't have Kirby Yates and Blake Trinan and all these guys, then, yeah, there's a conversation to be had about, okay, what are we looking at? Who are we looking for? What are we trying to do trade-wise? We're not there yet. The concern with the pitching is where it is because of injuries. And hopefully those injuries start to heal and nobody else gets hurt, and then we'll move forward there. But there is a name on the offensive side that we got from Bob Nightengale reporting that the Cubs and the Dodgers we're keeping an eye on Ryan McMahon. Ryan McMahon is the third baseman for the Rockies. He was an all-star last season. He is a guy they were probably linked to or at least mentioned last year. Let's kind of break down what he is. He's a third baseman that can play second base. He's played second base as recent as 2023. He is a guy that is an all-star because he was on the Rockies. He wasn't necessarily, a world beater. His final numbers last year, 20 homers, 65 RBI, and WRC plus of 89. His WRC plus for his career is 90, and he's never been higher than 97. So he's been around, but under a league average hitter for his entire career. It wouldn't cost much, I don't think. At least, well, maybe it would. The Rockies will want to charge more, put a Dodger tax on it. He has 2 more years under contract after this year at a very, very low AAV of 11.67, which with the Dodgers at this point is almost double that. So he can opt out after 2026 if he finishes top 5 in MVP voting this year, which I don't think is going to happen. So, yeah, Ryan McMahon fits this roster technically, but I don't think he fits this roster in a way that truly helps. Now, had they not had Hyeseong Kim, did they not have Alex Freeland in the minors, had they not called up Dalton Rushing, then yeah, maybe Ryan McMahon would help this team in the sense of he's better than the 26th man on this roster, better than the 25th man on this roster. But right now, I just don't see it. Obviously the Dodgers are going to be interested in a lot of different things and, finding different ways to do it. But I don't think Ryan McMahon's the answer. He doesn't do anything great. Offensively, offensively, he is okay. Defensively, he's okay. On offense, I try to find the splits. Maybe he's way better against certain hands than other hands. No, his career OPS against righties is 768. His career OPS this year against righties, I think, is maybe 775. So obviously that's good, but it's not great. It's not something that you have to go after. It's not anything that's like, oh man. And that's considering half his games are at Coors Field. So, maybe some of those numbers could be a little bit inflated. This year, he does have a 976 OPS at Coors Field and a 507 OPS away from Coors Field. So, yeah, he's not – he's a guy that would be a bench roll on this Dodger team, but I don't think they need another bench roll for an infielder that can play a couple positions, especially one that hits left-handed. Like, unless they don't believe in Hyeseong Kim or they're going to send him down for more seasoning in AAA, that's the only way this kind of makes sense. But even then, you don't get him to replace Rojas. He can't play shortstop, and Rojas bats righty and McMahon bats lefty. At this point, you just have enough guys that hit left-handed. Now, if you're going to do a complete overhaul and maybe, put McMahon at third and put Muncy at second, or you don't believe in Muncy anymore. Now, Muncy's numbers since getting the glasses have been better, but they haven't been amazing. It hasn't been like, oh yeah, Max Muncy's back. So maybe they're looking out for those type of contingency plans. I mean, they've. It doesn't feel like Max Muncy is someone they move on with, especially considering that he's still playing okay and has the potential to play better. He's not like Austin Barnes and Chris Taylor where he's bringing zero or negative value. He has the potential to bring value, and I guess that's kind of tough to think. If Nolan Arenado, I think the report was the Dodgers haven't really looked into him and hadn't looked into him. I don't think that's, he had a hot start to the season. He's kind of cooled off. I think since the start of May, Max Muncy's been better than Arenado on offense. Obviously, defense, there's a difference there. Muncy has had his struggles on defense this year. So I don't know. I don't see where Ryan McMahon fits unless they don't believe in Muncy. Because not even as a bench role, there's guys on this team that don't cost as much that would have better or the same impact that he would have. So, and it's, not wrong for the Dodgers to be interested in somebody and that report to come out that they are interested in somebody because there's always stuff they're looking at. When they traded for Chris Taylor, we don't know for sure, but I'm sure they saw something in Chris Taylor in terms of what they could unlock with his swing, and it ultimately worked out for them those first few years. Max Muncy, he was traded for, they signed him, but, did they see something in there that ended up leading him to, be top 10 in Dodger home runs? That's something that they could be and say, hey, we see this with Ryan McMahon. We think if we get him, that we can turn him into a legit, a real all-star, not a representative of a bad team all-star. And no offense to Ryan McMahon, but, realistically, the numbers weren't necessarily there for him to be, oh, yeah, super, all-star type deal. So, but yeah, ultimately my answer is he doesn't make sense for this Dodger team unless they see something in him and they don't believe in someone else that's currently on the roster. So I don't believe it's something that they're going to do unless there's injuries. And even if there is, the Rockies owner has been very adamant about, Dodgers and ruining baseball and stuff like that. And I don't think they would trade with the Dodgers unless it was a significant overpay. And the Dodgers aren't going to overpay for Ryan McMahon realistically. So that's just how it is, how it goes. But we wanted to talk about it because it was brought up, and Dodgers lost. So let's talk about other things. So. All right, Yamamoto's on the mound tomorrow. The Dodgers are facing the D-backs again. It's Mexican Heritage Night at Dodger Stadium. So hopefully tomorrow's episode we're talking about more positive things like a win, like 10 runs on offense, no runs on the other side. And, we have a little bit more cheer in this chat. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure you check us out wherever you get podcasting on YouTube. Become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. Check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Got the bad time for hiccups. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter, I've been since 91. You can DM us with any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or leave us a text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope to be here with us. So when you get in your car or if you're at home, tell your smart device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.